Well, my name's Ian Ratcliffe, and I'm a very good mate of Dave's, but you're not here to see me. We are absolutely thrilled to have coming all the way from down in the beautiful non-lockdown state of South Australia. You're out of lockdown now, I believe, gents. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're out, Dave, on Tuesday, actually. So, we're free to wander. Although the great thing is that we're considered to be an essential service. So we were never really locked down anyway.
And this is what I believe, anyone who says wine is not an essential service is absolutely certifiable. But guys, let me quickly introduce, we have two absolute icons of the industry here, and they'll get a bit shy, but honestly, guys, I'm so thankful that we have Travis Fuller, the general manager of Kilikanoon, and also chief winemaker, which is absolutely incredible to have Peter Waugh with us here as well, guys. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. By the way, Trav's the bloke with the blue vest on, and in case anyone's wondering, that bloke, the handsome gent there. But guys, we are in for
the one with hair. Yeah,
I'll remember that one, Trav. But guys, we are in for an absolute treat. We have three absolutely cracking wines tonight that I'm really excited to go through. Is it fair to say these wines, guys, are a real kind of icon for your brand and really shows the variety in what you guys are producing down there?
Definitely. Obviously, out of the three wines, the Riesling is the regional champion. And it's a wine that we've actually had acclaim from all around the world, in particular Germany, the home of Riesling. So that's a really nice feeling to get a pat on the back from the Germans. Obviously, the Cabernet is the unofficial red champion of the Valley. Some of the most famous Cab and Cab blends from the country come from this region. And no Australian winery can really hold their head up high without making an award-winning Shiraz. And our icon wine, the Oracle, is one of the world's best.
I think it's fair to say, in case you guys aren't aware, that these are the guys who have, I think is it twice you guys have won, or is it more than that you've won best Shiraz on earth?
It's 3 times now, Dave.
Wow.
And from 3 different competitions. So, it's not just one sort of set of people deciding these things, and it's also Langton's classified. So, it has its own pedigree in Australia.
Yeah, wow. I mean, congratulations, guys. That is quite an incredible CP to be rolling out. So, guys, before we jump into the tasting, everyone at home, let me explain how this works. It's a little bit unusual, these virtual changes that we've been doing. But, I'll be sort of hosting tonight, running through the wines with the guys. But it's really about as much interaction as we can get from you. So jump in the chats. Let us know what's happening out there. And, I'll keep an eye on it. We've also got some amazing technical Daves and social media Daves across all the different platforms that this is going out on. So they'll be able to let me know what's happening, and we'll hope to get to all your questions. There will be a lot, so I apologize if I can't, but pop them in there and we'll dive into it. So we're up for a treat tonight. Like I said, let me ask, gents, where are we starting? I'm assuming we're starting with the Riesling.
Well, we're definitely going to start with the Riesling, and I guess just to give you a quick background, we as a business started in '97 in Clare. Our founder Kevin Mitchell and his father Mort, and we're going to drink the Mort's Reserve Riesling in a minute, so we can talk a little bit about where that comes from. But, Clare's famous for a number of things, Riesling probably being the number one. But the fact is that we make a lot of red wine up here, and Kilikanoon is quite famous for its reds. I mean, essentially, you have to be able to make good Riesling in Clare Valley to even be here, right? That's sort of the ticket to the door, and then you start to move on from there. And, the team spends a lot of their time just developing and working through what is the 2 biggest varieties in the region, which is Shiraz, then Cabernet, then Riesling. So, we're going to taste through that whole range today. We're going to give you a sense of what the region is about through these sort of 3 wines, so that you get a sense of, as you can see behind us, we have essentially 4 hills, won't call them mountaintops, and 3 valleys running north to south, 30 kilometres by about 10 kilometres wide. And, there's a really diverse set of soil, elevation, and aspect of those vineyards that make it a very, very unique region. And that's why up here, we can grow award-winning Riesling, as Pete said, where places like, McLaren Vale and Barossa can't do that. So, by all means, we're going to start with the Riesling. We're going to take you on a little bit of a journey through what this region can really do in terms of great wine.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great, guys. Really excited. Just quickly, out of curiosity, just had a question pop up here. What is the elevation of the Clare?
It fluctuates anywhere between the valleys around 200, and our highest vineyard is just shy of 600, really. So there is quite a steep climb, depending where you are. In the 30K valley, it does actually undulate quite a bit. So there are some low-lying areas, which coupled obviously affects temperature hugely, but obviously the impact of the soil profile changing, that's what gives Clare its wide diversity to be able to do everything from super lean, fine Rieslings to highly concentrated Shiraz.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. That's great.
And I think the interesting thing is that we're what's called a continental climate, so we're not on the coast. So we don't have those sort of necessarily cool breezes like a Margaret River might have or a Coonawarra coming off the water, but it's that elevation, and what we call up here is diurnal temperature. So that is the difference between the very low and the very high temperatures. So during the growing season, you get anything down to sort of 12 degrees at night, up to 40, 42 degrees during the day. And what that does is it allows the vines to sort of shut down and have a good rest at night. And then during the day, they get all of that warm weather to help them ripen fully. So you get a power and but you get an elegance in the wine. And I know Peter will talk more to that later.
Well, I'm very excited about that. But I tell you what, guys, I realize we're doing a wine tasting and I'm not tasting it.
Oh, right. Oh,
and it's my fault. I haven't let us in. So let's give this a go, gents. Now, I know we've got a lot of people from, we're actually blown away all around Australia. I think we actually have hit every state, and we hit Northern Territory this time, which is an unusual one for us. So, hello, NT.
Welcome, NT.
They're not too far from you, mate. So that's a good thing. They're just across the border from South
It's still a decent drive, but you're right. And at least we can go there.
Well, this is true. We'll come back to this, and I know we've also got a range of people who, we've got some people that are really experienced with wine, which, obviously love the Kilikanoon complexity of the different wines that you have. We've also got a few people out there that maybe haven't been to wine tastings at length in the past. So just quickly, as we go into this Riesling and you run us through it, could you also just let us know a little bit about, some of the basics about how to smell, how to taste, and run us through like what a simple tasting might be, guys, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, easy done.
You go.
Here we go. Right, so you go, Pete.
Let's get amongst it. So the first wine tonight is the 2017 Mort's Reserve Riesling. As Travis mentioned, Mort is an homage to our founder's father, who was a vigneron, so spent his entire life working the vineyards and planting this vineyard as well. Mort still is out there at age 80.
Yeah.
He always wears a blue shirt and a white Akubra every day. If you're driving past the vineyard and you'll just see this white Akubra bobbing along, Mort's just out checking the vines or pruning. So he's still very much part of the family, which is great.
That's fantastic. That's great.
So the Riesling, this is a very special wine to us, obviously being in the Clare Valley, but it's also the vineyard right next to the winery, so we see it every day. It's on a lower slope, which is a very mineral sort of soil, a very chalky sort of soil. It runs east to west, so it has a lot of canopy cover. So there's very little light interception. So the fruit is protected its whole life. And it's one of the first whites we'll pick each year. We pick it to retain its natural acidity and brightness, which we harness in the wine to give it that longevity. We've only just recently released the 17. And it's this reason why that the wine is still bright and structured and able to be aged for years to come as well.
So if you can imagine with these sorts of wines, as Pete mentioned, it's single vineyard. It's right next to the winery. It's one of the original vineyards planted in 1970. And, Morton and Kevin, our founder, has been tending those vines for years, and they've been looked after, obviously, ever since. With the reserve, so there is a Mort's Riesling, which is just, slightly lower priced. And then this is the reserve wine. This wine, again, the grapes, we're not going to get too specific tonight, but picked on the 7th of March, if that's specific enough for you, Dave. But that's a whole week earlier than the rest of the grapes for the Riesling that goes into the Mort's Reserve. And the reason for that is that it maintains slightly higher acid. The flavours are a little bit tighter. It's not as rich, if you will, as the more, the lower price wine. So they're designed and they're built for the long term. They're designed for aging, to be able to go the distance. And as I said, this wine is now at 4 years of age. It will go for another 10, 15, 20 years of age, particularly now that we use screw cap in Australia. Obviously, grape closure, much better than cork. And that's really the thing that allows these wines to age gracefully, if you can be bothered. Some people like their wines young and fresh. Some like those sort of more aged characters that you can get with any wine. And with Riesling, they're quite unique.
Yeah. So Riesling is an interesting beast. It goes through what we call a dumb phase. So Rieslings are often drunk either very young, very early, the year of production or the year after, or you normally traditionally leave it 3 or 4 years to be right in that strike zone where it's coming out of that dumb phase, that muted phase, where it's starting to develop these secondary characteristics. And that's what I'm starting to see in this wine. That's why we released it now. So on the nose, I get this lovely sort of soft brioche aroma underpinning the lifted tropical fruits that are natural in the variety.
So you imagine, Dave, that as a person, right? So as a young person, you're bright and fresh and you're full of energy and you've got all of this life, and then you become an adolescent, a teenager, and you get a little bit clumsy and you're not quite sure where you're going, and you're not quite sure what your life looks like. That's a bit like Riesling, but then you come out the other side just learning the light and just being smooth and rich and elegant and full of life at the other end.
I love it. I've got a quick question for you guys. Maddie J has just asked, why are Riesling bottles a different shape, longer and thinner?
Well, we sort of refer to the old world traditions, I suppose, and it's just one of those things. So often referred to as an Alsace bottle, region in France, often being owned by Germany. So it's very much a Riesling region and revered as one of the best in the world. It's the shape of bottle they've always had, and it's just what's always been stuck with throughout the world. You will notice that
it's more of a traditional kind of thing.
Yeah, it's more tradition than anything.
Yeah, fantastic. There you go.
I guess the other interesting thing is just bottle color, because, obviously, these are quite dark bottles. Sometimes you see things like rosé that are in what we call flint or clear glass, like very much like the glass. But the issue with that is that, the UV light in not only in the sun, but also in just general lighting in your house, whether or not you have fluorescent lighting or any other lighting, affects the wine. Much like it does with beer as well, like things like Corona and the lights that are in clear glass. You've got to keep them in the dark. Otherwise, the light affects it. What does that do? There's a chemical reaction that essentially ages that product beyond where it should be. So, you go for dark glass. The darker, the better, and the longer it will last.
Yeah, great. So, guys, talk to me Riesling here. I've got I love this guy's handle that's just come up. Crazy R007. So, Crazy R007 has given us a shout out and said, getting a zesty kind of flavor, high in acidity. Is that correct? Is that a great way to describe it?
Definitely. And this comes back to what I was saying about the picking and the soil. It's retained all this natural acidity. And when we first ferment it, it is overpowering. And it's designed to be that way to make through that dumb phase, that adolescent phase, to come out the other side. Acid will slowly break down the wine over time and soften. So having enough there to support the wine during this time, but also to match the flavors and structures. I mean, I get that bright, zesty, almost lime pith sort of acidity carrying that wine, but it's underpinned by this beautiful texture, almost like a talcum-y sort of oyster shell sort of minerality coming through underneath. So getting the right acidity to balance with your right flavors is really critical, especially in something like a fine Riesling.
Yeah, great. So another one that's just came through as a question here. So we talk about, wine is obviously, when we're having a tasting like this, and this is something that Travis has taught me over the years, that it's always a great thing to taste the wine just the way the winemaker has intended, as you're talking, as the winemaker, as you've intended for us, mate. So really to taste it and go from there, which I find fascinating and tasting it. But I also get really interested. So, when we're looking at this, and maybe this is a question also for you, Trav, what sort of foods, you think of there's some things that are associated with Riesling as a whole, but I mean, is there something here that you'd sort of go, you know what, this works really well in a certain context, whether it be food or, kicking back in the afternoon, having a bloody nice barbecue with a mate? What's the sort of setting that you guys have in mind with this?
Yeah, look, I think some of these things is really interesting. I mean, the classic idea is to sort of match the weight of the wine with the weight of the food. So if you've got a light, crisp, elegant wine, you want some light, bright food to go with that. So the first thing that comes to mind, anything sort of seafood, shellfish, oysters, sashimi, prawns, you name it. But the great thing about Riesling, and again, because Peter mentioned, you get this power and concentration in the wine. You get an acidity that sort of cleans everything up for you. It's like this massive broom that comes through that just sort of makes everything refreshing and bright and crunchy and tasting at the end, that makes you salivate, right? You want another glass. Means that those wines can also go with some richer dishes. So think, smoked salmon, think steamed salmon, think something with some creamy sauces, because the acidity will cut through that fat, and as long as there's weight in the wine. So some Rieslings are very elegant, and they need elegant food, because otherwise, it's like a wave crashing over and it just gets swamped in it.
Yeah.
But if you've got a wine like the Morts Reserve, it has the power to take some pretty hefty sort of food. On the other side, go the other end and go to like if you go to desserts, get something rich and get sorbets, get things like that. Has a crunchiness and even the chill factor, the coldness of the wine with the coldness of the food can match. So, there's so many different things that make wine work. That's why it's not a science. It really is just, hey, drinking and eating. It's not so hard.
Yeah.
And I love it. That's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, I've got Research Dave has just dropped a fact on us. You ready for this one, boys? I don't know if you know this, but the first Rieslings are actually from 1402 in a city in Germany called Worms. There you go. Yeah. So it's been around a while.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know 1492, but certainly German Riesling is, it's, well, I almost say benchmark, but I'm not. Yeah, it's probably fair. I mean, the Germans did create the style. They have a massive range of styles, from bone dry to very, very sweet, and there's lots of rules that are built around that. But they've certainly been doing it for a long time, and they do it very well. And that inspired so many other countries to do it as well, like Australia.
Yeah, great. Just quickly on this one, guys, we just had another question saying, what does this retail at? Well, I can answer that easily enough, because we've got this on Drinks with Dave, and we do have a very nice mates rate. So if you guys want to jump on this, and this is a very big high five to Kilikanoon for helping us out on this, but you can get this absolutely cracking Riesling for only $45 a bottle. So, guys,
Is that
if you want to
Dave's
get a hold of that, that's Dave's mates rates. Dave's got you covered. So head on in, and if you guys want some, I know I can certainly hook you up with a good deal. So don't worry about that, and we'll be good to go. So, guys, that's a cracker. I absolutely love that one. And now, as we sort of, one more question, guys. If you've got any other questions, throw them in now before we move on. And so, I suppose one of the things that are there, we need to kind of be looking at, when we're talking about Riesling, what are you trying to do here? This is the question. What are you looking for, particularly, Pete, when you're making these Rieslings? What are you thinking? What are you looking for personally as the winemaker?
Making this wine is quite an interesting experience. Firstly, you have to be true to the site. It's a single vineyard wine. So you really want to have that expression of site. We are really blessed. The winery is smack bang in the middle of Watervale, possibly the most revered sub-appellation of the Clare Valley, especially for Rieslings. So that true expression of that linear tropical fruits while still being undertoned by that citric acid and having it enough to be bright and mouthfeeling without being astringent or puckering. It's got to coat the palate, like flow through the palate without being a slap in the face. And just getting that balance. When you're making whites, it's about balancing the acidity to the sugar or the sweetness. Whereas in reds, it's about balancing the tannin to the flavors. This wine is such a fine balancing act. And I suppose that's critical for us. It's having that expression of Watervale, but having it in the finest balance that we can. So, yeah, that's what we really chase when we blend this.
Well, mate, I can tell you one thing. I absolutely love this, so thank you. It's been a real nice treat for me. But
and if you're wondering, Dave, Watervale's sort of just here. We're in the southern part. I like that I can point to. I'm getting used to this now. You're in the southern part, just in here of the Clare Valley. So it runs 30 kilometres essentially north to south, but you're in the southern part, and Watervale is, as Pete said, the most famous region essentially for making Riesling out of Clare.
Yeah, fantastic. Very nice, mate. I am very much looking forward to when we are allowed to travel once again, coming down and visiting Kilikanoon. It's
no, you're not allowed. No.
This guy's banned.
No, Dave. As long as you book, Dave, you're allowed.
Mate,
but don't just rock up unannounced. Yeah.
Just quickly, because I've actually got a little, before we jump on to the next one, I've got Doug Vandergelder, who has actually visited in 06 and came away with the 04 Oracle, raving about it. So very quickly, if someone in the future, if someone does want to pop in, what's the situation? Can you just drop in, or is it a situation where you need to book in advance?
Look, I was being a bit flippant before. We prefer that you book because then we can look after you, but there's no way we turn you away. At the moment, as you know, with COVID restrictions, it changes every day. 1 minute it's one person in 4 meters, it's one in 8. It changes, but we've got a pretty good space set up. We've rejigged the entire cellar door to cater for COVID restrictions, and in fact, I think it's much better for the visitor now because you get to sit down. You've got table service. You get much more attention than potentially, what historically in the industry is like a transactional piece. You've got a bar, you get the sheet, they go, what do you want to taste? And then you just get wine sort of served to you in that regard. This way, we get the chance to do a lot more of the storytelling. We get a lot more chance to spend time with the people that visit us. And look, let's be honest. I mean, a lot of people come to Clare to go to Kilikanoon. It's one of the, I've got 4 things I need to do. I've got to eat here. I've got to do the Riesling trail. I've got to go and do X, and I have to go to Kilikanoon. And it really is a bit like that. And we appreciate the fact that people do travel to come and see us.
That's brilliant. So, guys, when we are up and about, definitely head down there. If you can get there from the different states right now, jump on. Is the best way to get in touch with you guys on the website, kilikanoon.com.au?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, we
Wonderful.
we'll always talk to you. You know, well, not on a Friday night because we're busy at the moment, but any other time. Sure.
Awesome. That's great to know, guys. Well, look, that Riesling has been a cracker. And can I suggest we jump on to the first of the Reds, gents?
Sure.
Unreal.
There you go. So the next wine before Pete jumps into talking about it is the Blocks Road Cabernet, and you know, we talked about Mort. We talked about our beginnings in '97, and this was one of the original 4 wines that was part of that group. Blocks Road runs behind the winery, thus Blocks Road. You know, they were very creative in their day when they were coming up with names. And, you know, again, Cabernet is really quite unique to the region. And we're pretty proud of what we do down here, again, because of the climate that allows such diversity.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, Cabernet is one of these unspoken champions of the region. Clare is quite well known for some of the best Cabernet and Cabernet blends, even though that some other regions herald it as their own champion. But this is the 2017 Blocks Road Cabernet. Cabernet has a real special place in my heart. My mother's French and I got to do a few vintages down in Bordeaux. So I got to see some really amazing Cabernets and got to learn a lot. And for me, great Cabernet has got to be softly varietal. It's got that hint of tomato leaf. It's got that hint of capsicum up front, but with all the dark brooding berries, black currant underneath lying. A solid Cabernet should be a series of layers rather than just a slap in the face of fruit. So having that fine balance and evolution on the palate as you enjoy it is something that really, for me, is a hallmark of a solid Cabernet. And I really see that in this. The 2017 was quite a wet year and was probably detrimental to some reds in some other regions. But where we are with the Cabernet, it allowed that slow ripening and just that time on the vine to get this intensity, which we've been able to harness that skin tannin, that seed tannin, those different flavors in the wine, all matured in French oak barrels for about 16 months, just to become this fully integrated product. And that's what we have in the glass tonight.
I tell you what, this is one of those wines that, for me, the smell is really special. Like, I know that sounds like an unusual thing to say about a wine, but for me, it tastes delicious. But for me, the aromas that I get out of this are just such a complex. But I think the way you described it, the layers, is really, it's funny. I always wonder when I'm talking to a winemaker, are they seeding words into my mind? Which is always the question. But I really can see that, mate. And what a treat this is. Thank you for
sharing. That was the vaccine that seeded ideas into your mind, Dave. You know, the thing about these and the great skill of people like Peter is, you know, we have this, as I said, 30 by 10 region that is very diverse, taking all of the different parcels of Cabernet that is available across the region, different altitudes, different soil types, different aspects, keeping all of those separate before they're actually blended right at the last minute to go, right, what is it that we want to do with all of this? You imagine a painter that's sitting there with the palette, with all of the colours, and just goes, right, I'll take a bit of this, bit of this, bit of this, and there, that's where it goes. I mean, you know, I'm sort of bigging him up a little bit, but you know, that's sort of what it's all about. You know, it's that memory or idea of what is that supposed to look like in the bottle as a style of wine, and that's the skill. You know, that's where it really comes into its own for wines like this, and for like many of the other wines that we do. So, single vineyard is great. It gives you an interesting aspect based on the vintage and the soil and the place where it's grown. But these wines are where the real skill is in terms of being able to build the flavour, the layers, And we're actually quite lucky because we've had this wine open now for a couple of hours, and it's actually looking magnificent. Because everything sort of softens, everything gets a time to breathe, everything starts to open up. And as you said, that the power of that Cabernet on the palate just has this real core of flavour right in the middle of your tongue that then just explodes, and you just feel it all the way down the back of your mouth. It's just it's really quite. I'm enjoying it anyway. Just me.
Hey, you're in good company, mate.
He thinks you could do better, but it's just vintage. He just relies on whatever grapes they give him. Really, it's just.
Yeah, great. Well, this is a good thing. So you mentioned it's a French oak. Was that correct?
Yes. So for me, oak is obviously for all winemakers. Oak is a very important part of red wine making. But for me, less is more in this case. Oak should be adding to the wine without driving a wine. So having that oak texture in the wine without ever really saying this wine's oaky. I mean, nothing so disappoints me when I open a bottle of wine and my first descriptor is oak. I mean, you've just gone too far then. I mean, it's great that you've invested the money in the barrels, but you've wasted the quality of your fruit by masking it all. So having that seamless integration and being a support player rather than a predominant driver is a big part of it. We've actually really lucky, especially with our Cabernets. We've been able to go to France, work with some of the coopers and custom make barrels for our styles. So the barrels are actually attuned to the fruit and the style that we're going for. And not every winery gets to do that. So we are really blessed by being able to do that.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And I find it so interesting that, and again, I think for me as a very much an amateur wine guy, it's absolutely just mind-boggling that, and I consider it like this, almost like a puzzle that winemakers go through of like taking the different parcels of grape and then balancing it here, and every year it changes, and then I've got to get the oak right. It's an art form, and I think that's a really interesting way that you put that, Trav. So no, well done, mate. Again, another cracker. I must admit, Kilikanoon, it has a special part in my heart. I haven't actually had a bad wine that I don't like from you guys, so it's always nice going through. Bullet dodged, when it's coming from me, it's like, high level. Yeah. But guys, it's a treat. It really is. So this one, again, I'm getting the same question. For me, where am I enjoying this? Is this more of like and again, I know it's all personal preference, right? You can drink what you like, where you like, with whatever you want. But for me, this is a wine that I absolutely love drinking by itself after dinner. This is a real staple at my place. It's a real great one that I really enjoy. Just sitting down, if you've got a few mates over, outside of COVID, of course, kicking back and doing the right thing and sitting around a fire with a glass of this, and I'm a very happy man. Do you think at all when you're making the wine, are you purely focusing on the wine, I imagine, or do you take into consideration the usage of the wine afterwards, Pete?
You've got to be aware of the usage. The Australian wine market ebbs and flows like any other consumer industry. And as our culture is developing and becoming a more food-focused culture, we've got to keep that in mind. This has seen trends of, say, lowering alcohols from back in like the 1990s, which were a lot higher, just being able to be more approachable, more food-friendly. And I suppose, once again, just especially with a Cabernet, which is a very traditional varietal, obviously a very important variety in the old world with huge regions supporting it. The food culture that they enjoy pairs so well with the wines. That's always in your mind when you're making it. So it is a wine which can be paired with food. But in saying that, when you're a winemaker, you've got to be making wines to be able to drink. Unfortunately, you can't only make wines that you like yourself. You've got to make wines that will be very popular. And so you find a happy medium balance between that. You've got to embrace your own palate, but also think of what else is going to work with. And you've got to be able to balance it across a wide range of things. I agree with you 100%. I could easily sit down with some duck terrine and eat this and then finish the bottle afterwards.
Well, I can tell you we've also got, of course, we had Chris Gardner's at home, and he's just saying he's got a really lovely block of aged cheddar that it's going down a treat with as well. So I can imagine that also. That would be brilliant. Another little comment that we've got from Danny. Danny's really commented of that, and I'm just testing as I read the comment, but it's also saying it's really herby on the nose. However, not Herbie Goes Banana Herbie, but it's a really nice. Yeah, I get that. Do you know the thing that always blows my mind with a Cabernet is when you talk about the tomato. What is the tomato stem?
Tomato leaf. Yeah.
Tomato leaf. Every time I hear that, I think that is absolutely a stretch, and then I smell it. I'm like, no, I get it. Yeah, that's there. It's such an interesting aroma to get from a wine because when I taste it again, I get nothing like that sort of flavor that you'd expect from the stem of a tomato. Really interesting how that comes together. Quick cover question I've got here, a technical question, is when I'm doing this, when I'm drinking it, should I drink and then try to take a whiff as such? Should I be trying to smell the wine at the same time? Or is it more of a, smell, enjoy the smell, and then now I'm going to go into the flavor?
Right. So I guess, the whole science behind tasting is complex. It's a great word, organoleptic, where essentially, you taste a wine, but a lot of what you take into your brain and your memory is from what rises back up through the back of the nose and the retronasal passage. Okay, so put it simply, when you taste a wine, what you get is you get the texture and the weight, and there are certain feels that you get in the mouth. But a lot of what your brain registers as flavors and aromas is all from that sort of retronasal passage. The when you taste and you swallow, it comes back up the back of the throat and into your nasal passage and into your brain. So, it's a complex thing, and that's why, if we go back to, if you take a glass, you get a nice big glass like this where you give it a good swirl. You want to get a good surface area to get lots of those compounds, those volatile compounds actually coming out of the glass, and then they come back up and are concentrated in the middle. You smell it, yes. And it's sort of like Pete's saying, he clicks all these things off. Oh, we get spice, we get this, we get that. Your brain sort of gets that. You taste it. The next thing is it comes up the back of the throat, and then you get that back into the brain again. So, the key for you is you want them to match. You want the aromas to match what you taste. But a lot of what you taste is actually, in your mind and the way that it comes back up the back of your throat. So that's why, yes, it's good to take a good breath, suck the wine through your mouth, swish it around, give it a good opportunity to get, get aroused in your mouth. And that's sort of what you're trying to do. Like anything, you tell a kid, you hold the nose, you eat the Brussels sprouts, you're not going to taste it. Don't worry.
Especially for cooler climate wines and more fine, elegant wines, that retronasal, that breathing in after you've swallowed the wine, is critically important. It adds to the flavor on the finish because those vapors lift up and re-trigger the brain again, saying, this is what you're tasting. So it does add an entire other level to the wine, one which is often revered as one of the most enjoyable aspects, that linger, that finish, those long-lasting flavors. And that's where it comes from. So taking your time and thinking about the wine, just breathing after a nice mouthful of wine will actually enrich the wine's experience.
Yeah, it's a great call because it's definitely that. You just sort of, you swallow the wine and then you just go, and you can just feel it come back through, and it changes and evolves because, it heats up. If you can imagine, the volatile compounds come off different parts of your body, they heat up, and you get them at different times. And that wine, and that's why they talk about, length, i.e. the flavour, how far back you feel, and persistence. So how long does that flavour stay with you? And I know with that Block's Cab, I mean, I can still, you just breathe and you can still feel it coming back, and you feel different things. And that's where you start to think about, oh, yeah, this is blackcurrant, there's this. Oh. And that's what the guys do, to write the tasting notes, to understand the complexity of the wine. They do that every day.
Yeah, great. We've just had Matthew has just jumped on and asked,
is that Matty Curry?
I know it may be. I'm not sure who this Matty is. Has just asked, what's the aging potential for this cab? Would you say?
I reckon it's right in the strike zone right now. Like if you've got this, I'd be happy to open this any day of the week. But it's still got that really sort of bright acidity running through it. In the middle of that fruit, there's this fine line of acidity, which is nice and cleaning. And the rest of the palate folds out from that. The fact that that is still so prevalent makes me think this wine's going to run for at least another 5 years. So you do have quite a window to drink it. But for me, the flavors are bang on right now. And this where
it's personal preference,
It's personal preference, and you've just got to learn your own palate. If you like it now, drink it now. If you think it's still a bit too bright and crunchy, give it a year. There's so many options with really well-made wines. There isn't a definitive, you must drink it on this date. There's always a window of opportunity, and you've just got to dial in on your own palate.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Great advice. So when I'm going through this, I've got a few questions that are popping up. And guys, I'm sorry if I'm missing your questions, but here's an interesting thing that we're looking at. Oh, actually, I can answer that one quickly, Phil. That's just popped up. Is that and this fits in with the next of it. If you guys want to support Kilikanoon, because it'll lead back to it, feel free to jump on. This one we've got, I think, Tech Dave, what are we putting this one at? I think we've got this one at a really good price. I think it's like $36 a bottle or something like that. So you can grab it. Yeah. They are very good rates, not to be repeated, guys. These are exclusive due to the tasting. So don't go down to your local bottle shop and ask for it at that rate. But
you won't find it. You won't
yeah.
find it there.
So here's the question we've got for you guys that's popped through. And again, this might be a bit of a sensitive question, but, I ask the hard-hitting questions. That's what Dave's about. Is that, jokes aside, with the changes that we've had with the Australian wine market with China, has that affected you guys in a negative way?
Look, it's been challenging. It's like having any market. You don't like to lose it. The benefit to Australia is that we're able to, to supply some wines that we weren't able to before, and that's not like we were neglecting the market at all. I just think that there was a demand in other places. So yeah, it's an impact, but it's not a debilitating one. I think for us, we make great wine and we're pretty happy to sell it where we can. And we're just happy that people love it. I mean, we've had other markets open up, to be honest, outside of Australia, South Korea, for example, New Zealand, the UK is back, Canada. So there's lots of places and that want to buy the wines, which is fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. And it's no surprise. It's fantastic wine, guys. You should both be really proud of this. So, great that it's like you said, markets shift, markets change. And when you've got a great product, I'm confident that it'll endure, which is a great thing.
We just pivot. Isn't that the word? We just pivot to something else.
If we pivot anymore, we'll be pirouetting down the main street, they tell me.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. So, if we jump back in to the wines, because again, I am mindful of time with everyone. I'm excited about what's next. We've had so many people commenting on the Oracle. How many times? Everyone's got a story about this wine that has been popping up on these channels, which I love. They're like, oh, I visited in this year and I got that one and I got this one and I got that one, which is just great. Is it fair to say, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, is this like the iconic wine of Kilikanoon, really? Or, I mean, how does it fit within the range?
Yeah, I definitely see this as our flagship wine. We're a bit of an anomaly for the Clare Valley. While the Clare Valley is revered for its Riesling, we make some pretty serious Riesling. We're actually predominantly a red wine producer. And as Travis talked about before, the soils, while we do have some beautiful mineralic soils for our Riesling, we have access to some beautiful Terra Rossa, deep, loam, red soils running around our vineyards where some of our finest reds come out of. The Oracle is one of the hardest wines for us to blend. as winemaker team.
Right.
It's often the first one we blend, so you're sort of spoiled for choice. And it takes all day just to narrow it down and pick the eyes out of really some sensational single batch wines to make this amalgamation of a wine that is focused on concentration, but still without being over the top. So it's that dark fruits and cool climate aspects of Syrah or Shiraz that is endearing without being overly built and so far gone that it's unpalatable. So it's really pushing the limits, but it's also the finest attributes of what we can get across the entire range of the valley to utilize each individual site as best we can.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So when you come to a wine like this, and I do want to taste it in a second, I'm just so interested by the complexity that goes into something like this. So are you earmarking grapes before they come to market, or do you have vines that are like specifically grown for this? How does it go? Like I know when you've got a wine like this, I understand this is, to be completely honest, there's got to be a bit of pressure as well. The Oracle's got a reputation. So how do you go about like getting ready for it? Talk me through that winemaking process, if you could.
So we obviously have different vineyards which perform different ways. But as you mentioned before, climatic experiences, different years, different sunlight, different temperature, different rain. There's always change in the vineyard. So we keep an open mind. And I suppose the first time we really see it and raise an eyebrow is in the vineyard when you taste the fruit before picking. You go, oh, this could be something special. The next big time is probably at press. After the fermentation on the skins and you're pressing out, as the press happens and you're getting all the last goodness of the grapes, you get this real concentration. You probably see the wine at its absolute brightest. And that's where the mental notes really start ticking and going, this will be something special. No, go get the small batch stuff. Let's handle this. This gets buried. Make sure no one else touches this. This gets looked after. So that's probably the time where the first true mark goes against the wine, is at that press. And from there, we watch the evolve over 12, 16, 18 months in barrel until we get to the point where we sit down and we pull out all our favorite batches and start the blending process. And we get to something almost Oracle. Then we lay out every single barrel and we go through and choose each individual barrel that makes it into the cut. So it's refined and refined and refined again until we get the absolute best product we can.
Yeah, wow. And so how many bottles or cases are you producing of this year?
This is quite a small run, and we only make it in exceptional years. So we are doing...
It does depend on year, right?
400
does? Yeah.
So it's not a big volume by any stretch of the imagination.
400 dozen. Yeah. That's it.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So this is a really special wine in regards to in taste, of course, but also in regards to access, really.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. You go to the Oracle for insight and wisdom and for enlightenment, Dave, and that's what what this wine is about. And it really is. It is the best of what the team and what Pete's team does every year. And we are just very, very lucky as a business to have access across such a wide range of vineyards. And, some of those are 100 years old, some of those are younger, 20, 30 years old. But it's that combination. And so, what they're always looking at is like a style. This is what they want to make. Here's the star. And they sort of work towards that every time. And it's all about style. There's some of these vineyards, there will be a basis of vineyards that will make it reasonably regularly, and others that come and go just to make sure that they hit this mark every time for that wine.
Fantastic. Well, guys, we've talked about it.
Have we tried it yet?
I've been well behaved. I've been...
I got my big glass now. I've moved up. If you can see, if we move back to the Riesling size glass, we've moved up a couple of levels.
There we go. We're getting closer. My glassware's not as good as you guys. I'm learning still. But I do have the right glass for the Oracle. Don't worry about that.
Very good. Yeah. Well, it looks like the Riedel Magnum glass. Well done.
I'm learning from the best, Dave.
Again, for us, Peter will definitely talk more about this wine, but the Oracle again is our flagship. It's part of the Langton's classification. What does that mean? Well, that's just about a way of ranking some of Australia's best wines. There's about 130 odd wines on there these days. And, you have to have a run of vintages, at least 7 with a certain quality. And then you have to have a good track record in the secondary market, i.e., when you go to auction to buy wines. And that's a two-edged sword for us. I mean, it's really nice that wine that you make maintains or increases in value. But at the end of the day, I'm sure Peter makes wine for people to drink, not to buy and sell. So, it's great that we get that award, and it's important. It just goes to show that we are, one of the, I think, in a great group of wines in Australia. And there's only a couple in the Clare. If you look at the James Halliday ratings, there's a 5 red star rating, if you will, which is the top rating. There's 4 of those now, only 3 before, but there's now 4.
Fourth this year.
Fourth this year.
Yeah, wow.
And, so it's Windermere, it's Grosset, it's Kilikanoon, and it's Jimbarry. So, we're in really good company up here, making great wine.
Yeah, brilliant, guys, brilliant. And I tell you what, this is a cracker. Brother Jones, whoever Brother Jones is, has just said, what a fantastic drop. And I tell you what, this Oracle is a delicious drop. So we're getting into that. Before we do the tasting, I've also had another question, and it's actually very apt. They've just asked me, do you do private Drinks with Dave's tasting? My team at work would love this. Well, the good thing is, guys, you might not be aware, but that's the main part of Drinks with Dave. And we're really excited that, and honestly, really feeling quite blessed that Kilikanoon have actually joined Drinks with Dave. And we can now actually offer this to you guys at work. So if you want to come along, get in touch with the Drinks with Dave team, and we'd love to have you along to go through a tasting like this. And we've also got a couple of other options, which actually can go into 6 wines, which are a real treat. But anyway, guys, we're here. Let's have a quick look at this. Well, maybe not too much of a quick look, because I can spend a bit of time drinking this, gents.
Yeah, well, we were saying before, I mean, Shiraz is the biggest, the most planted variety in Clare. So, Riesling, while very famous, is not necessarily the biggest thing that we do. And interestingly, as a complete aside, Kilikanoon and through Pete and the team do great Grenache. I mean, we take an enormous amount of Grenache that's out of the region, and that's becoming quite an amazing and interesting thing as well. Shiraz, definitely Oracle is at the top of the tree, and Peter talked about how they source that right across the region that we're in, but I'll leave you to talk.
Sure. So
you made it.
The 2016 Oracle, really good year. So quite a warm year across the continent, but with this really interesting early rain in February, which sort of just revitalized and lifted everything, which was perfect for the reds, just at the right time. And then it was dry the rest of the harvest. It didn't rain once. So there was no disease pressure, so it was absolute ideal growth conditions.
Right.
And that's reflected in the fruit that we saw out of the 2016 vintage. Bright red fruits over the top by this lovely sort of dark berry concentration with almost this sort of little licorice sort of hints to the back of it. And all these things have been developed in the bottle since we've made the wine. To me, it's a true use of the word cassis. It's a word which gets bantered around a lot in the wine industry and often not justified. But
you said it quite a lot today.
To get back to the French root of the word. It's that mixed berry. It's that raspberry. It's the blueberry, the boysenberry underneath. It's sort of, but it's got all these lovely little hints of spice from everywhere, from cinnamon to clove throughout the wine. And it's just this rich, enveloping wine which coats the mouth without ever once being a sharp edge or an angular wine that you sometimes get. The flow in this wine from front to back is velvety. And that, for me, is the mark of a great Shiraz. It doesn't stand out to be one-dimensional. Whereas the Cabernet was layered, this is a flowing effect. And I think that's one of the marks of this nicely aged Shiraz.
And I think, Dave, that the thing here is to decant the wine as well. We've had this wine out now in the beautiful duck decanter for a couple of hours, and it really does soften that tannin. I mean, they are pretty. It's a big wine, right? It's a big, powerful wine, and when we first opened it, you go, whoa. It's a big mouthful of flavour. As Peter's saying, they soften all of that tannin, just rounds out really nicely. The region, because of the cooler conditions, gives the acidity and freshness to the wine. And then you end up with something like, after an hour and a half or so, it just looks absolutely delicious.
Yeah, I tell you what, it's a treat.
The fact that the wines retain that concentration, to me, is the most amazing thing. It's got these soft edges, but in the core of this wine is so concentrated and so focused. If you went to a blind tasting, I would say the majority of the people would think this is a lot younger wine than it is, just because of the richness and concentration in that palate. The fact that it's survived so long too, it means it's well ingrained in the wine. So once again, while this wine is right in the wheelhouse, it's right in the strike zone for drinking now, I would have no hesitation in leaving this in my cellar for another 5 years at all.
Yeah, right. Interesting. I mean, we've just got Doug has just chimed in here saying this has all those flavors, but they're really well balanced. Everything you've described there is just this beautiful balance, and I can really see this at the same time in that space, which is awesome. And a quick question that's come from Chris MJ06 has said, will the Oracle get drier in the future as we go forward?
Get drier, as in...
Will it dry out?
Oh, will it dry out?
I don't think it
will.
No.
This is such a plush wine.
Just keep going. We're good to go.
I mean, it's got a sweetness to
It
that
does.
fruit that you just sort of think it's going to continue.
Yeah. Sweetness is often a double-edged sword word in the wine industry. And sweetness in this case means fruit sweetness, not sugar sweetness. The fruit sweetness comes from that ideal growing season that I talked about before. And now it's become the plush core. While the tannin is built around it, that plush core is so ingrained, I can't see it falling below the tannins. And that's where when you see wines which do have that overly drying effect, it's normally when that core is fallen away and it's left with the acid juxtaposing against the tannin without any filling, without any stuffing. Often referred to as a hollow wine. But this is so bright and rich on the palate, I can't see that happening for quite so many years.
We all dry out eventually, Dave, but the idea is that you can see that fruit sweetness that's going to hold that wine for a long time. Yeah,
great. I tell you what, guys, this is a classic. And the quick question that's popped up here as we're enjoying this, and the other great thing to say, guys, and I will throw this out, that we know this is a very limited wine, but we have been very graciously given a very small portion of this. So if you do want to get a hold of this Oracle, we're very thankful to Kilikanoon that we do have this. So jump into Dave's shop and Dave's pantry, I should say, and we can organize that for you. But a quick question that has also popped up here for you guys is, what's new and interesting at Kilikanoon? What are you guys working on? Without spilling the beans too much.
I'm not sure. I mean, look. Firstly, I think Pete can talk to this more, but we work on lots of things every year. The whole idea of winemaking is you do some of the classic things that you do, you refine them, which means that you actually always experimenting to refine. It's not a recipe, no matter how much people think it is. It is feel all the time. But they're always tasked with things every year to go, let's try this, let's try that. We've got a new brand coming out in October this year, which is our experimental small batch range, and this is just another side of what the team do every year. Working with Grenache, doing some Cab Malbec, Shiraz Viognier blends, looking at a German style Riesling, which is lower alcohol but has some of the sweetness.
Wow.
What's he doing there?
What
am I missing? I'm missing something.
We've created a lot of
whole bunch Grenache.
Whole bunch work.
Yeah.
So going back to very traditional, old school style winemaking, removing all machinery completely from it, plunging, foot stomping, the limits.
Really?
To make these
That's
really
fantastic
and bright characteristic wines. As Travis mentioned, it's called small batch for a very good reason. It's done on an extremely small scale. It will be very limited, but once again, it's done to reflect the true expression of that vineyard site. These are all tiny parcels and treated with absolute individual care. And so it's getting back to that real traditional root, that old school touch of focusing around a single parcel of grapes rather than something like the Oracle, which is the best of the best. So while it's still high quality, it's a different story.
Yeah. So there's some pretty fantastic things happening there. And then, of course, we're doing new slants on, some of the traditional blends in Australia, like Shiraz Cabernet with our Morrison's blend, which is, won double gold in Germany and the likes as well. These things are always reinvented. They're always, every year is like a new opportunity to do something different. You've got to remember that, wine is a living thing, and the opportunity to sort of nurture it is pretty broad, and the guys are essentially left to themselves to do that.
That's brilliant. I love that, guys. And I think that's the thing, like we were talking about before. Every year, you just have to roll with what you get, and that has its I imagine it's amazing opportunities and also the challenges that come with that as well. So
we've seen a couple of things that haven't quite worked out, but the things that do far outweigh them. It's on the core things, and then sometimes you have to push the boundary. You have to go, what would happen if I did X? And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And quite honestly, you get one chance, right? One chance every 12 months. So it's a long time between drinks, Dave.
No doubt, Trav. No doubt, mate. I find that absolutely fascinating. I'm watching some of these conversations in the chats coming up, and we won't go into answering these ones, but I'm just admiring that someone said if Kilikanoon was an animal, what animal would it be? And I believe a panther, and then someone else has pointed out that perhaps a mantis shrimp. I don't know what a mantis shrimp is, but maybe it shall be. I think they're the ones that are like really quick.
I'm not a shrimp. I'm a king prawn. Is that the one? I'm not sure.
I'm a little lost, but we'll roll with it. We'll roll with it.
Excellent.
So, guys, as we said, we've got some amazing. If you guys want to support these guys, and again, thank you so much, guys, for allowing us to actually have some of the Oracle to sell. It's a great product, and you've been amazing, guys. If anyone else has got any other questions, jump in now before we finish up. But, honestly, this has been an absolute treat. Some cracking wines, gents. Absolutely thrilling for me to enjoy. So, and I've learned some more. I've got my notes. I've been writing around, and I need to come back to you. I'll have to get an email from you, gents, talking about the scientific breakdown of my different orifices and the way they go back. But it was impressive. I'm going to start calling you doctor. Doctor.
Yeah, mate, that's the word of the day for you.
You guys are Dr. Dave.
Try and give you something new every time. That's the idea.
Mate, it's the gift that keeps giving, Trav. It's what I love.
Right. Fantastic.
Quickly as we go. Sorry, over to you, Trav.
I was just going to say, if any other questions, otherwise we should leave people to their Friday nights. All I want to say is that we understand that people all around the country are in different states and under different levels of lockdown. We think about you. We're quite lucky. We've just come out of one, but we know that others aren't so lucky. So please stay safe and enjoy what you can. Look after your family, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Amazing. Thanks, guys. And look, everyone, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We've got a whole range of things out there. If you want the rides, jump online. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next one. And Trav, Pete, thank you, guys. It's been an absolute treat. We'll see you guys on the next one.